Okay, and we'll just edit. Second, we'll start. Okay, excellent. Now it's streaming live on social media as well. Thank you everyone for coming and for being here and for sharing your time with us here today to hear what Victor has to say about the principle of social entrepreneurship. Hi, Victor. Thank you for having the time and for sharing your time with us today in this next 30 to 40 minutes. Today we have Victor is our speaker today, and it's a very interesting one because he's a sustainability influencer, a coach, and a consultant with over 20 years of experience in education and training, working with individuals, agencies, and businesses. So I would not take a lot of time introducing Victor because he will introduce himself better with a little bit more details. So yeah, hi everyone, and let's talk social entrepreneurship, right? Victor, can you please introduce yourself a little bit with more details? You know?
Okay, so I'm Victor Brannigan. I'm from Ireland, and I live in rural countryside in Ireland. And I have lots and lots of different hats that I wear. My least favorite question is, what do you do? And my most favorite answer is I do my best. So I do lots of things. I'm quite I live in an old farmhouse that always needs attention and whatever. But I do work with individuals and with small businesses, and my main interest is green and sort of alternative business over years. And social enterprises are particularly interesting. Now, there's also community enterprises that may be providing services locally who may not have an awful lot of trading income. But social enterprises, by that I would mean those who are focusing on a traded income as well as perhaps some core funding, some grant funding, etc., etc. And I've been working with them for a good few years, and I've noticed some things that I think has led me to identifying what I call the principles of social enterprise that we'll talk about.
Yeah, before we get into the principles and discussing social entrepreneurship as a concept and as a field, I would like to ask, like, what was the motivation for you to enter in this field, like in social entrepreneurship, green entrepreneurship, community enterprises, you know? Just what was your motivation?
Well, I think basically I'm a social change maker. I disagree with a lot of the outcomes of the systems that we have in lots of countries where so many people are left behind or ignored or unemployed or whatever. And it's a very wasteful social system that we have. And so I like this whole idea of making social change happen with intention, strategically setting about how to do this. And so social enterprise is very often involved in this. As I say, some people in social enterprises, not so much, they're just supplying a service perhaps that may be an unserved need, but it's not disruptive social change, which is where I get excited about how we change things for the better. And
yeah,
so
excellent.
From small, I've always been self-employed, and with my experiences across many different fields, I've concentrated on these different businesses and as a coach and influencer, writing strategy or policy. And so that idea of how do we language the change, I think this is the starting point for so much real change. Can I express it well? Can I language it well? And that's where I often come in with people just reframing and rephrasing what it is they're trying to do.
From your experience, well, because you said you're a consultant and you come in just to help them say what they want to say and disseminate their activities and their products to the wider audience, to the general population, let's say. From your experience, which social enterprises, for example, if working in green entrepreneurship or in community entrepreneurship, have most trouble in disseminating their mission or their vision or their products and services to the larger community, let's say, to the general population?
I think it's probably those who are the most reactive rather than strategically proactive. And there's so much to be done, and it's so underfunded, and then people are just running and running and running to stand still. And I think those enterprises, although they have great heart and put in a huge amount of effort, they sometimes we've got to say no. We've got to say enough. We've got to stand back and just think, okay, you know, I'm getting exhausted here trying to do really good work, but I need to stop doing this sort of tsunami of change projects that they may want to do, and so it's this balance, I think, that even standard entrepreneurs have of where is it just strategic intention and where is it arrogance. You know, there's a danger that they're a very fine line. But for social entrepreneurs, a lot of them are exhausted because everything needs to be done. It all needs to be done now. And sometimes also if they feel it's all up to me, nobody else will do it if I don't do it. And that's personally very draining and exhausting. Mm-hmm. So I think those people who don't take time out and step away from it and, you know, come with as a good strategic plan, they are the ones who probably need this the most, but do this the least.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, when we are talking about social enterprises in different areas and in different types of or subtypes of entrepreneurship, we see that we are talking now that they have an issue with communicating their mission, products, services, vision to other people, and that's where you come in. But also they have to communicate their principles and people to learn how they work and what they would get out from that work. You know, what is the outcome and the output and then the outcome and so on. So in that sense, what are the issues that social entrepreneurs and enterprises face in terms of communicating the principles or probably living the principles that they have set as a social enterprise?
Well, I think that the main issue is one of confusion. That in Ireland, for instance, social enterprise has been happening for a long time, but happening without a structure or even a recognition from formal government. That only has happened in the last 3 years, and we've got a great team in the government. They're doing good work, but a lot of people have been, you know, doing good work, but just it's grown and grown without necessarily having a really good structure or framework. And so the first thing I think for real change is to get the language to express the change well, to sort of think, okay, I get this now. And so my view is that in Ireland, and I was in Italy working last week in the region of Emilia-Romagna, and they have a very strong framework for social enterprises and cooperatives, and it's for the last 30 years, and it's amazing just the sheer size and organization of them, because they've got that, they're held well in a framework. But I think that in Ireland, we hear a lot of discussion around, oh, you know, we have to be more business-like. And I keep saying no, that actually social enterprises are, you know, businesses need to be more social enterprise-like. And not the other way around. And so business, there's a kind of an inferiority complex for social enterprises and community enterprises. And in fact, they're working to an operation budget. They're working with social justice issues, maybe with disadvantaged people or whatever, and they often have an environmental care direction. And so they're a multi-perspective business. They're actually not business light, but business plus. Now, some of this won't translate into other languages as nicely as that, but it's important that we start to discover, you know, that actually what social enterprises is doing is the cutting edge of 21st century business, and that yes, there's mistakes made, and yes, it's very frustrating and difficult, but that's part of being on the edge, being on the forefront of breaking new ground.
That's great, and I agree with that statement. And I think that there are different principles that are that drive social entrepreneurs and social enterprises, and you know, standard businesses or commercial businesses, let's say. So in that sense, what are the differences in principles that are underlined in the social enterprises as opposed to commercial businesses?
Well, I think the first one is that often what social enterprises are trying to do is that it is something that is not worth anybody's time, but it is worth everybody's time. Now, by that I mean that we all know that, you know, the society should be caring for our elderly or looking after the sick better, etc., etc. And so often the standard business doesn't do something because it's not worth their while. And we've done a lot with standard business. This is not an anti-business rant. It's just to recognize the difference of where we're going with business. That when you've got an individual value of something, you know, that if I set up a shop and I sell things and I make a profit, then that's all quite simple. But when we're trying to manage lots of different outcomes, as social enterprises do, then it's very often a case that it's not worth anybody's time, but it is worth everybody's time. And so to shift the thinking into that, it at least says, okay, well, this is why we're different to standard business.
Great. I'm just writing in chat about the first principle. So it's not worth anyone's while, but it's worth everyone's while.
Yeah.
Excellent. And, you know, what about you know, businesses are operating when they want to make the value first, and then to get a profit, and with that profit to scale up and get, I'm saying about the commercial businesses, and scale up and make more money and so on and so forth. While social enterprises are, although they're growing and scaling up, they're just contributing more and more to the society and to their communities, instead of making a profit and just getting rich by themselves. So can you share your opinion about this? You know, this separation of principles between the commercial and social enterprises in terms of profit and identification and so on?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're, you know, for the sake of making a point, I oversimplify things. You know, obviously there's lots of private businesses doing great work. They've provided lots and lots of great services to communities and countries over a long time. I'm just saying that we're at a point where we're rediscussing this. And one of the difficulties with the English language is that the word value and values are confused a little, and value seems to often mean price. It is a richer word than price, but I can have lots of other values as well. So that's a little bit complicated for people who are not native English speakers. But one of the things, the next thing that what private businesses tends to do is that it says, if you identify a value, so there's money in this sweet shop. If I buy this building here and set up a sweet shop on that corner, I'll make some money. So they identify a value, and then they get the steps, the activities to reach that value. And that's the standard way of doing it. And until that value is clear, they won't necessarily take the steps. So again, we're making it simple just to make the point. There's lots who take who do work towards a vaguer value than a specific profit figure. But social enterprises always do. They say, look, this activity needs to be done. We need to provide, say, community-based laundry facilities for our village or our suburb or our town. And we're going to do it. We're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So they create the activity and they practice the activity. And sometimes they do it over and over and over before the value becomes really apparent. Mm-hmm. Because multiple perspective values are more difficult to identify. And there's more than one right answer to an awful lot of what social enterprises try to do. So, often the social entrepreneurs will believe first and manifest later. That is, they'll do the activity just because they know it's the right thing to do. And then, what that value outcome exactly is only becomes apparent after and often their collaborators also get involved. Mm-hmm. So I was involved with a mattress recycling company in Cork, and it was employing disadvantaged people. And we were maybe 3 years into it before we started to get a better value proposition that made sense. So mm-hmm. even though the local municipalities and county councils, as we call them here, they wanted to be able to provide a service where mattresses did not go into just a big hole in the ground, what we call landfill in English. Yeah. So we operated that business for 3, possibly 4 years before we started to see that the private industry shops were coming to us and other people started to see it as a real value proposition. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I mean, that you have to do that. And they wouldn't have seen it unless we went over and over and over with the activities and showed the viability.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you need to have a good value proposition before you start. So you have to believe in it. You have to have a value proposition that is measurable, that can be achievable, and afterwards make the activity and undertake the activity, conduct the activity, and see where it goes.
Yes, because but it's that the value proposition is blurred. We all know that we don't want mattresses going into a big hole in the ground. We know that, but there's no direct money in it when we started. And then if we couple that with offering work experience to people who are disadvantaged in the workplace, this was quite industrial work experience. It was in and which is quite unusual. A lot of social enterprises are in softer type industries, cafes or community cafes and things. And so we went ahead. Now we had to get some funding to set this all up, but we went ahead without having a clear value offer mm-hmm. because it was the right thing to do. And that's what social entrepreneurs do. They get started, and somehow they and often it's quite radically different, the value proposition in the end. But that is and a third principle then is dealing with uncertainty. Now we all do. This last 2 years of COVID has brought uncertainty right up close and personal to all of us the world over. However, there's an underlying sort of belief that you don't really move until you're certain that you can achieve something in mm-hmm. private standard business. Whereas dealing with uncertainty in all sorts of ways is a fundamental principle of social enterprise. In other words, it might be the uncertainty of the value outcome, but it might also be the uncertainty of job roles and who exactly does what. And can I have, wear one hat in the morning and a different hat in the afternoon? And actually, lots of would-be private entrepreneurs do this. They're good with wearing different hats. They have to be, because they have to manage everything in the very early stages. But standard business is, your role is, you're the media officer, so you don't get involved in anything else. And but social enterprises are often built on this dance of people doing different jobs, as required. And we need, as a society, to be more comfortable with uncertainty, because it's with us. We had this sort of almost Victorian belief way back 100 years that we could define everything and we could order everything, and we get things, and we get this massive Excel sheet and everything has to fit into it. There has to be a little Excel cell for everything, and it's just rubbish. Like, for lots and lots of what we want to do, particularly social entrepreneurs, we need to be comfortable with uncertainty and to go forward in uncertainty, not just get overwhelmed by it, but to strike it. And that is very strategically different.
Yeah, I agree. So, because they have social enterprises have two missions, right? The economic one and the social one. And the uncertainty here, it's always when they intertwine and they affect one way or the other. So every activity you undertake, you conduct, either it's leaning on one way or the other. So uncertainty of situations and uncertainty of ecosystem, uncertainty of internal procedures, and how you develop the enterprise. We are living in uncertain times, and every day there is some uncertainty what is going to happen. Even for this essay talk, we can be uncertain who will hear it, who will learn it, who will basically adopt it as their own. So we have to learn to live with uncertainty. I agree with that, especially in these troubled times.
Yeah.
But I'm coming now. Probably I would shift things a bit and say that when we look at the SDGs from UN, we see that there is a sustainable development goal, which is partnerships, and social enterprises are very strong, or they would like to present that they're very strong in networking, in collaboration, in partnerships. So what about building networks and partnerships? Can you share your opinion on this?
Well, within a lot of the use of the word collaboration is that it's just for a different word for networking. And by networking, I mean going into a room and handing out business cards, or having 10,000 people on your LinkedIn profile. Collaboration is not networking. It's working together. It's collaboration. And it requires a very different skill set, a richer skill set than networking can be very me-centered. It can be, can you give me more business, sort of focus. Whereas when we want to share value, and as I say, a lot of the activities, a lot of the fruits that we're trying to reach through social enterprise are shared value goals. And therefore, it's more, how do we do this with others? And some social enterprises in Ireland might have started, how do we do this for others? Support the disadvantaged or whatever, but in a kind of we're doing it for them. But now we're looking at, how do we do it with them? And that might mean a radical change on what we thought our goals were. For instance, getting people a job. Sure, it sounds, great. I'll support you to get a job, but maybe a job isn't actually in your best interest or in some disadvantaged group's best interest. Or maybe, that what we have to do is to redefine the job idea by learning from the people whom we're supposedly trying to help to get a job. And so there's this collaboration. It's uncomfortable a lot of the time, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable is part of what we have to do. We have to stay with this, not run away because it makes me feel awkward. It makes me feel paternalistic, or it doesn't suit my ego or whatever. Then we've got to stay with this and say, okay, well, how do we reframe this whole concept of what it is we're trying to do? And that's where we get these multiple right answers, where we get these different perspectives of we're trying to achieve several different goals at once. The word compromise, often in the standard entrepreneur language, is almost a dirty word. It's a letting go. We hear of the I struck out and I did this and I set up the factory and I made the profit, and it's very much a me speak, and we really have to change the conversation to a we speak. And that's the depth of collaboration. So the first thing when social enterprises want to try and start doing something new is, how do we collaborate in a voluntary, participatory way with others? Not how do we do it on our own?
Yeah.
And obviously, that has a beneficial effect in the sense that then I don't have to provide, or that enterprise doesn't have to provide all of the solutions. They can use the building belonging to the church. They can use some labor belonging to people who have, labor things to give. They can partner with other private businesses who may have a waste need, like the mattresses, etc., etc. And so, but it's easier to do. You have more legs to the stool, if you like, by trying to do it in a collaborative way, by working with others. It may be slightly more frustrating at times, and it may be slower, but it's getting us to these multiple goals that we're trying to access.
Yeah, and now we have touched upon the ownership models, and there are a lot of blurred lines here, especially, for example, I would say on the Balkans and in the Southeastern Europe, there are a lot of blurred lines in terms of ownership when it comes to partnerships and collaboration. Yeah. For example, if the building is from the city and I don't know, the utilities are from the church, and but the funding is from a donor, and the activities are undertaken by the social enterprise.
Yeah.
So a lot of blurred lines here, and when the outcome comes out basically from the project or from the activities or whatever, then it's the question of ownership. Who made the product, or who invented the service, or who made it happen? So yeah. There are a lot of blurred lines here when we are talking about the ownership models. And here in this region, a lot of it is not clear, let's say, legally, yes, both institutionally as well.
Yeah. And there is, and ownership is very often, what the language around it is either or. Either you own it or you don't. Mm-hmm. But we're stretching that a lot in lots of different countries. Say, for instance, the zip car idea, the urban car, where you don't own it, but you have the use of it when you need it idea. Now, that if in Skopje or in Dublin or in Berlin, if there are 5 of those, it's no good, because when I go to use the car, somebody else is using it, and I'm thinking, this is no good. But if there's 50,000 or 500,000 of those in the city, then actually I don't need the car at all to own the car, yeah. Because because I walk down and there's 3 cars on my street, all of which are available. So, you know, when Mr. Google started and there were 2 web pages, it wasn't any good to anybody. You know? And then when there was 2 million, people went, oh, wow, look at this. Imagine I can do something, get a flight or do something. Now that there are 2 billion and there's 4 billion people using it, this is a life form all of its own.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at ownership, the private individual value. Now, I own my house, I own my car. I'm not anti it. This isn't a Marxist Leninist rant. You know, I'm just saying that we've got advantages today to rethink ownership, and we need to have it more or less of an either or, and move to an and also consideration of ownership. So do I own my car? You know, or do I have to own my house? Really, what I need to do is to live in a house, and I'd like it to be a home. You know, and I'd like it to be nice. If this house is not worth any money to me, if I'm living in it, it's only worth money if I sell it. Yeah. So, you know, we again, by changing the language of the conversation, by softening some of those either or terms, we get into this blurred boundary idea. That changes my drive to having to feel that I own everything. Similarly, with, you know, community services, you know, our bus services, or et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's all sorts of reasons. For instance, in Ireland, we have very poor public transport in country areas. If we were to consider car sharing, where I could get a lift with people, then we could drastically reduce the mileage. However, it's uncomfortable. I have to ring my 2 or 3 neighbors and say, are you going to my local town today? Can I go with you, etc.? They have to pick me up. And this is considered uncomfortable only because the goal is I don't need anybody. I have everything. I own everything. I. If we were actually thinking, oh, wow, that's great. Victor wants a lift into town today. I can hear all his news. Because now that we're all driving cars, in my country area where I am, it's hard to build a community at 60 and 70 kilometers an hour. I don't see anybody unless they happen to be pulling out of their gate just as I pass by.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're walking or cycling, or if we're sharing lifts, then I get to know, and I know the story about their son or their daughter or their illness or their this, that, and that's building community. So ownership seems like, oh my God, we can't touch that, we can't touch that. But actually, we might also gain something by loosening ownership rules. And that would mean having different types, lots of different types of ownership, degrees of it in some ways, rather than either or.
Yeah, but it's also a matter of what is the right thing to do, right? It's not only whether it's I or I would have a lift with my neighbor or talk with him and build a community. That's okay, but also we have to do the right thing, right? And what is right for the community, not only for ourselves. So besides eliminating selflessness or selfishness, let's say, we need probably to change the mindset to doing the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do. Now, and what's your opinion on this? Because social enterprises having mission and having principles, and they're living by them, they're working by them, and they're basically conducting activities that are making they're achieving or attaining their social mission, right? So they're improving the community somehow, building the community, trust, and so on and so forth. So what are your thoughts about, well, somehow we merged into this with the principles and doing the right thing, you know?
My thoughts. So, are you asking on how we, specifically on ownership here? I'm not sure quite what you're asking me to address.
No, not only on ownership, but just the working of a social enterprise. It's based on principles. It's based on a social mission that need to be attained in order for them to be successful.
Yeah.
So sometimes the environment doesn't provide you with the tools or with the, let's say, the opportunity to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But
absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
The environment is set in such a way where you have to navigate it, navigate the ecosystem or the environment or however you want to call it, to achieve your social mission.
Yeah, this was what was so amazing in that region of Emilia-Romagna, that from 1991, there were requirements in law that councils and certain businesses would engage with what they call social cooperatives. And so the social cooperatives had a certain security and a scaffolding, if I could use that word, a framework that would support them for years. And so, you know, I was in ones with 200 and 300 and 500 people employed. So you're absolutely right that there is a requirement for you know, that the stronger and the more supportive the ecosystem or the landscape of it, then the more that social enterprises actually can serve society. If we get into a situation where it's all about the individual and private industry will provide everything, you know, I would say that it will burn. That model is shown to be dysfunctional because so many people get left behind. And so I think that social enterprises all need to congratulate themselves. I think they need to maybe stop talking on an inferiority basis that they are somehow, because they may be getting funding, you know, that they're not self-supporting in a way. That, you know, we need to stand up and say it out loud and out proud of just what exactly social enterprises are doing and can do. And there are, no doubt about it, there are some social enterprises in every country that are actually what I call petty dictatorships, benign petty dictatorships, but they're actually run by one person who makes all the decisions, etc., etc. And that's not the best practice, but they're still doing good work. But it's dependent on one person, and it's often driven quite a lot by perhaps ego. So that happens quite a bit. But look, this is new ground, so we're going to make mistakes. We're forging ahead here. We're addressing big social issues with limited supports in a lot of ways. And so we need to ease up and say, look, we're doing our best here, you know. So these principles that I've sort of tried to identify is that I think it allows people to see what they're doing more clearly, and therefore are useful for them to understand themselves in their environment, and hopefully other people will find that useful.
Excellent, Victor. You know that we can talk for hours and hours and days and months.
Well, I'm Irish. It's a national disease.
Yeah, it's okay. Here we are the same. So we'll leave the other principles, or basically we will touch upon maybe in a few months again to see if something has changed in practice, but also in theory as well. And yeah, I don't want to cut this short, but I said it, I'll take 30 to 40 minutes of your time. So we are already around 40th minute. Yeah. And I would like just to say to you, how do you want to close it? Because I always provide an option for the speaker, how they want to close the event, whether it's on a serious note, like like a definition. Social entrepreneurship is something like that, or more on a motivational note for so new and upcoming social entrepreneurs, or as an advisor, like you're advising social enterprises or entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think we can be motivated if we start to think, look, you know, this is messy, it's confused, it's unclear, and we're doing great work and we're forging ahead. So let's be proud of being social entrepreneurs. Let's not think that we're inferior business. We're business plus here. And, you know, we may not be giant multinational private companies, but, you know, they have a limited, there's downsides to that as well. So we're doing great. And the people who are engaging and trying to understand this are at the cutting edge. And so I think we should support ourselves and be proud of what we're doing. Look, there's years and years of work ahead of trying to solve some of these enormous problems. But I think that what we're doing, and sometimes, as I say, people are doing it without clarity, and hopefully these principles will help people think, okay, this is I see this a little bit more clearly now. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Victor. I think that now the time is coming for social entrepreneurs. Although now it's trendy and modern and so on, but I think that the time, the momentum has not come for social entrepreneurs just to make the influence and the impact that they want in their communities, in the world, or in their cities and so on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for being a part of the episode 3 of season 2 of the Social Entrepreneurship Talks, or SE Talks, as we would like to call them. Thanks for everyone for having the time to be with us today and stick to until the end. Now I'm going to close the event. We are together with Victor Branagan today, and I'm Stefan Streliev, the Executive Director of the Social Entrepreneurship Observatory. Thanks again, Victor.
Thank you very much, and thank you to those who've attended.
And talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.